Hello, everyone, and thank you so much to join our show. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Brian. Hello, Brian. How are you
Hello.
doing?
I am wonderful. It's going to be a beautiful fall day here in Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you so much to join our show in the morning time of you, and we appreciate that a lot. I think for our culture, it's going to be such an honor and pleasure to hear more from you. And would you please share with us a bit about yourself and your story?
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. I spent the entirety of my career in the insurance industry, and during that time, I came across the work of Dr. Robert Cialdini, who is the foremost expert in the world when it comes to the science of ethical influence. And because I was involved in sales training, I was fascinated by his research. I knew it would be able to help in terms of our sales. And I just started to weave it into everything that I was doing. And I knew that I was going to someday leave the insurance career and do this full time, teaching people how to ethically influence others. And I made that choice about 4 years ago, and it's been incredible. I have enjoyed it so much. Even with the pandemic, I have literally met people around the world, and it's been an awesome experience.
Wow. Brian, thanks a lot for sharing your story in less than a minute. So it's too fast for us, too fast to furious for us to understand. So let us examine your journey together. All right. So
Sure.
when Vivian was let's start to bring all of us back to when years ago. So when Vivian was young, she wanted to become a singer. When I was young,
Hmm.
I wanted to become an astronaut. So life didn't give Vivian nor myself a chance to become, what we want to become. So Brian, you
Hmm.
have an outstanding career journey. You have an outstanding, works to helping people around the world with, and to do the better job at what they do. We want to know, what did you dream when you was young? What did
Hmm.
you think that when you grow up, what kind of job you're gonna do, what kind of influence you're gonna provide to the people around you?
Yeah. Well, like a lot of kids here in America, I think I wanted to be a pro football player. But really, as I got older and I got involved with weightlifting because of playing football, I really thought, I mean, I fell in love with it. My body took to it. When you're a teenager and you're getting big and strong and people notice, that feeds your ego. And so when I went to college, my intention was I want to own a gym. I was competing in powerlifting when I graduated from college. I was a competitive bodybuilder for a number of years. I loved everything about the gym. And so my intent was I in school was studying general business so that I would have a well-rounded background. I was the president of the weightlifting club for 3 years. There was hundreds of members. So it was like owning a gym. So I was getting all of this preparation, and I don't know where I let go of the dream. I jokingly say I got a job, I met a girl, I bought a house, and there was never a day where I let go of that dream. But here's the really cool thing. I realized years ago that I actually fulfilled the dream
Oh.
because here in my home we have a basement and I have a really nice gym in my basement. So I am a gym owner.
Mm.
It just wasn't the way I imagined it would be. And so I try to encourage people and say sometimes you're fulfilling your dreams, but because they're not exactly how you envision them, you don't realize it. And you have to step back and really look at the entirety of your life and think about that.
Mm. And that's thanks for sharing that, because a lot of us overlooked of what we accomplished, right? So sometimes we thought that, okay, we just don't see what is that we've been having in our hands. And when we take that pause moment and reflect and then relook at the accomplishment that we've been doing, perhaps some of the things that we've been dream when we were young actually have been accomplished years long ago that we didn't even realize. A lot of my audience, my speakers also share the same, Brian.
Yeah, and sometimes I think pursuing your dream, even if you don't fulfill what you thought was that dream, can lead you down a path where you would say, thank God that I pursued that, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be here. Maybe I wouldn't have met the person that
Mm.
I'm now with. Maybe then we wouldn't have had the children or the career trajectory. There's so many positive things that can usually be gleaned from that journey and where you ended up, and recognizing I wouldn't be here if
Mm.
it weren't for the path that I took.
Mm. Tell us how, from the moment, how did you from the gym owner dream to become a 30 years successful in the insurance space. What happened there? How did everything started?
because of a girl.
Because of
When I
the
when I was in college, I had accepted a job. In the last week of school, I
Hmm.
got a letter from Travelers Insurance Companies, and I almost threw it away. And the only reason I went to the interview was because the job was in Columbus, Ohio, the place that I had mostly grown up, and the girl I was dating was here. So I thought, well, I owe it to her to look at the job. So I go to the interviews. I liked everything I heard. I started thinking about, well, I'll be close to her. My family's here, my friends. Columbus is a very nice place. So I took the job. Now, the irony is 2 weeks later, when I started, or 2 weeks into starting my job, I met my wife. I actually met her on the first day, but 2 weeks into the job, then I wasn't going out with the other girl, and I was dating uh, Jane, and we've now been married for 34 years. So again, the irony of, I made a decision for one reason, had no idea that it would lead to what it did. I had a wonderful career, but certainly the best thing I got out of that decision is 34 years of marriage to my wife.
Wow. She will be the happiest person on earth hearing the message you just said.
I hope she'd be happy.
Brian, but you got in there by chance, but you decided to stay there by choice for 30 years in various roles. Why is that you stay in that same industry for that many years though?
Well, I recognized that, well, first of all, almost any job you take in a corporate position, you're going to be doing so many of the same things, whether you're working for a bank or insurance or many other fields. You're going to be answering emails and phone calls, and there's so many things that are similar. But what I liked about the insurance industry, I really believed at the end of the day, we did two things. The first thing we did was we helped people. If our company and the insurance agents that represented us, if they did their jobs well and tragedy struck, then people would hopefully say, thank God that I had my insurance with you and your company, because we were going to help them do whatever we could to get them back whole, replace their cars and rebuild their homes and do those things. And I think that's a noble thing. And then the second thing that we do that most people don't think about is the insurance industry here in the United States really stimulates the economy. Because if you think about a bank, if they're going to lend you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, they want to guarantee that if something bad happens, they're getting their money back. And when the insurance industry makes that guarantee, then more money is lent, so businesses are opened and homes are sold and cars and all the things that go with that. So it really has this big ripple effect in the economy, which is helping people because it's more jobs and things like that. So I think those are two amazing things that insurance does if people are doing it well and with integrity.
Wow. Thanks
And
for.
you wrote a book about it. Would you please share with us about that book?
So I took Robert Cialdini's concepts around influence, and I looked at the sales process, and I wrote a book called Persuasive Selling for Relationship Driven Insurance Agents. So those insurance agents who really recognize that the heart of their ability to sell and retain customers is about building relationships. And so I take his principles and I look at starting with prospecting all the way through how do you use the psychology to get more and better referrals. So the book focuses on that, uses insurance examples, and then I talk about other concepts too, like persuading different personality styles. But the book is very much geared towards insurance agents and field sales reps that work for the companies.
Well, Brian, a lot of you know the book was written because of a lot of years experience that you had in the insurance industry, and that coming from your real life experience. So you allow us to understand that because a lot of people will only see the current things that you're doing, but they will never see the journey that takes you from the up and down, the different path that you've been in that 30 years. So tell us how everything progressed from day one, when you had the baby step get into the industry though.
Mhm. Well, I started on the underwriting side, and an underwriter working for the company, their role is that when the insurance agent submits a risk, they look at it to determine, do we want to try to write this or don't we? And there's criteria that they're using to make the judgment. If we do, at what price, under what conditions? And so a very analytical job. And I'm a very analytical person by nature. So that's where I started. Ultimately, I morphed into the sales department. Now, in all honesty, I thought sales was BS because I thought, in being a logical person, the only thing that the other person cares about is getting the lowest price. And sometimes insurance agents are beating you down trying to just get you to lower the price. But I started learning from somebody who had a lot of integrity. And as I listened to John, he was a coworker and ultimately became my boss, I realized what we say and how we say it and how we present information can make a world of difference in terms of someone's willingness to say yes to us. So I started getting involved in the sales training. I was working mostly with internal associates at the company. And that's the time that I came across Robert Cialdini's work on influence. And that happened when a coworker gave a video of Robert Cialdini presenting at Stanford. She came down to my boss and I in the early 2000s and gave us this video. And she said, I think you guys will really like this. I watched the video, and for me, the light bulb comes on. My first thought is, wow, the psychology that he's talking about, it explains all of selling. It's either why certain approaches work or why they don't. But it was the underlying psychology of selling. The second thing that appealed to me was it was all based on research. And as I mentioned, I'm an analytical person, so I wanted to know why this works. I don't want somebody to just rah-rah and try to motivate me. I want to know, just like you'd probably want to know if a doctor is going to prescribe a diet or an exercise regime, why? If they can show you statistics, you're more confident. So the research aspect really appealed to me. And the third thing that I really liked was his focus was on ethical influence, non-manipulative ways to get people to do things. And I like to think that I'm a good moral person. I try to do right by people. So that's when I began to utilize that video and was talking to people about the concepts. Now, here's the really cool thing. One day, one of Stanford's marketing materials, their flyers, came across my desk, and I'm flipping through it, and boom, there's Robert Cialdini's picture. And in bold letters at the top, it says bestseller, and right underneath it, it says, call it influence, persuasion, or even manipulation. And I thought, I can't believe they actually used that word, manipulation. So that moral part of me felt like it needed to be addressed. And so I emailed Stanford. And I basically said, I don't know anybody who is looking to become a good manipulator. And I don't know anybody who wants to be manipulated. That one word cannot be helping your sales, and it's probably really hurting. I never heard from Stanford, but sometime later my phone rang, and it was a representative from Robert Cialdini's office. And she said, I'm calling to thank you on behalf of Dr. Cialdini. You sent an email to Stanford, and because of that email, they're changing the marketing of all of our materials. And I was like, wow, that is really cool. So we had this nice conversation, and before we hung up, she said, if your company is ever looking for a guest speaker, he travels the world and speaks on this. I said, I sit next to the woman who plans our events and brings in our speakers. You want to talk to her? And as fate would have it, it was the summer of 2004. He was in Columbus, Ohio a number of times to speak to the insurance agents that represented our company. And that was the beginning of my relationship with him. And I always think, wow, if I hadn't felt so compelled to address manipulation and sent that email, literally the course of my career, and in many respects, the course of my life would be very different than what it is now.
Wow. And it took a lot of courage for you to email Stanford University directly and ask them to correct the materials, that they sent to you. So back then there was a lot of other choices you could do. You could ignore that. You could, you could share it publicly with your friend or something like that. But why did you choose to go directly to the giant university and address that little word manipulation in the marketing materials, though?
Well, I felt so good about what he had shared in that video. and his stance on ethics. And whether it was just an oversight or a bad copywriter or something, I felt like it was doing a disservice to the good work that he was doing. And so that, I think, is why I felt like it needed to be addressed. Something I have seen about Dr. Cialdini, when I had an opportunity to have dinner with him, and my boss and I were out in Arizona that summer when he was coming to Columbus, and we had dinner with him, when he asked about how we were implementing his life's work, and we began to talk about that, he leaned into the table, his eyes got wide, he had this huge smile on his face, and you could tell he was so intrigued by how we were using his life's work. I mean, it meant so much to him. And I remember thinking, this is a guy I want to be associated with, because he really believes in what he's doing, and he knows it can help people, and he's doing it the right way. And I'm so thankful that ultimately it led to me getting certified and being one of his trainers around the world.
And then there's 8 billion people on earth, only 20 of dozen of them got certified in this program. How did you persuade him to put you onto the program and get you certified for that, Brian?
Well, the bigger sale, or the bigger influence I had to have, was actually within my own company, because it's a little bit of a lengthy process, and it's somewhat expensive to go through the certification process, all the things that you need to do. And I had to literally stay on my boss for 3 years to finally get the green light to go out to Arizona and go through the training. In terms of working with Dr. Cialdini, they're very cautious, I guess, about who they bring in, right? There's only a dozen of us right now who are certified to teach his methodology. They practice the principle of scarcity. But his big thing is he wants to know that whoever is representing him and sharing his information is going to handle it with the kind of integrity that he would. He is almost more about the presentation of the science than he's not motivated by money. He's motivated by his life's work getting out there and being done in a way that would make him smile. And so internally, I had to work very hard to get that okay. But once I did, the good thing was, working for the insurance company, I had a large group of insurance agents that I could market this to and continually put on workshops. And so that part came fairly easy.
And then, so tell me, what year were you got certified by Dr. Robert?
So I initially met him in 2004, and it was 2008, early in 2008 when I got certified. And then I started doing workshops within the insurance company. But I also recognized pretty quickly that I could do things outside of the company. Yep. And I was blessed that my boss was great. He said, as long as you're not working with another insurance company, because that's a competitor, I can't do that. And you don't work with insurance agents who don't represent us, because if they want the training, they should sign up with us. Other than that, you go do what you want to do. And, sometimes a boss might feel like, well, hey, you're putting in so much time in this, why don't you just work more in the company? He recognized, and he told me, every time you go out and speak, every time you go out and train, when you're writing your blog, you're a better speaker, trainer, writer for this company. So he recognized that this passion I had, that I was also working on outside, was making me more valuable inside. And so he did nothing but encourage me. And I started doing more and more work outside of the insurance company, and recognized this is something I could do with the rest of my career. And so I began to, I got the website built. I started to build out my presence on LinkedIn, started writing my first book. I just started making a move in that direction. And then when I left the insurance company about 4 years ago, it was a little earlier than what I had planned for. But I was so thankful that I had done all of this work beforehand, so I had something to step into that was getting pretty fully formed. Even with that, there was still a lot of stuff that when you become an entrepreneur that you have to do that takes just a huge amount of time. So I was so thankful that I had the infrastructure laid already.
Because you are analytical person, so things are actually planned ahead in advance, very structured ways for you to see the measurement and for you to make the decisions, right? We have a lot of audience who also analytical people, and then but making that big jump is not an easy one, regardless if you have a good plan in place, right? So tell us, how did you see the sign that it's the right time just to make the move and get out of the insurance space and then start your own company?
Well, I'd had the company started. Again, I had the
Ah.
LLC, I had all this stuff going, but uh, I was looking at the metrics of my company and retirement plans and things. And so I thought I was going to be there a couple more years than what I was. But things began to change in a way that I didn't agree with. And I just knew in my heart, I can't look at you and say, you need to buy the insurance from my company. I could no longer look at insurance agents and say, you want to represent our company. I couldn't look at people and say, you should come work here. And I thought, you know what? If I can't say those things, I don't belong here anymore. And I don't want to be unhappy and I don't want to be a detractor. So I went in and I had a conversation with the CEO and I let him know why I was going to leave. And it was November of 2018 when I officially stepped away full time. And I'll be honest, it was scary. I had all kinds of people saying, "Oh my gosh, you're going to do great. You're going to," and it felt good that people had confidence in me. But laying in bed at night and thinking about things, I had a lot of sleepless nights where something would hit me and I just couldn't get it out of my mind. And so I'd get up at 3 in the morning and I would maybe start working on something. It's not that way now. I've got a great rhythm and I'm like in my flow state when I'm working. But yeah, early on, it is, no matter what other people think of you, it's scary because there's so many things you need to do as an entrepreneur and there's so many choices to make. It's like, where am I going to focus my time and effort? Because if I don't get laser focused, then everything gets a little bit watered down and nothing seems to work very well.
Thanks for sharing that. Brian, I we have a lot of executives that who are our friends, right? And then that's two things that they always say that they regrets, common regrets we see from them. At first, they never start the company earlier. Okay, so second is they know that they can write a book, but they yet writing it. So we always encourage them as you can always start now. You can always start your own company also the way that you want it to be, and it's never late, right? So you accomplish both. We wanna move into the directions of where you write your books, and then what makes you make that decision to write the book on influencing and create your influence in the next level?
Well, the first book that I wrote, I started long before I left the insurance company, and I started compiling old blog posts. So I've been blogging weekly for more than 14 years. That's a lot of writing. And so I started taking some of those, as I would read things and hear people, recompile blog posts into a book. And so I took a lot of those. I had to do a lot of rework. It certainly wasn't like copy and paste, and there's a lot of rework that goes into it. And then you have to write the opening and closing, and you have to tie things together. So it ended up being an awful lot of work. But I knew I needed that for credibility as an entrepreneur and a speaker. Now, it's almost silly that writing a book has absolutely nothing to do with your ability to stand on stage and speak, but it is a marker. If there's two people who look essentially the same, the person who's got the book is going to probably get the nod.
Yep.
And then, by the way, you can sell your book at the conference, which is nice. The second book came about because of all my work with the insurance agents and understanding the sales process and wanting to have something that could be the basis of a workshop. And so I was able to knock that book out really fast. And then the third book that I wrote was during the pandemic. And like so many people, I had more time on my hands. And I'd always been intrigued by business books that were of a parables type story format. So I thought, I wonder if I could write a story that would teach influence. And I sat down and began writing that book, and it was a lot of fun. I had never written anything, not even a blog post. I had not written like a story. But I ended up sitting down and doing that, and it's got a lot of great feedback. And I recognize, some people won't pick up a sales book. Some people won't pick up my first book, which is heavy business / psychology. But a lot of people will pick up a book if it's a good story. And so now I've got a whole new avenue to teach people these concepts that I deeply believe will help them enjoy more success and happiness.
Because at the end of the day, we all long for happiness, right? We want to be successful, but a lot of people are successful and not happy. So if we can have a combination of successful and happiness, then that is a sweet spot right there. So can you share with us a little in that book, little stories in there that can, you can demonstrate that first. Can you do that, please?
Sure. So almost every character in the book is based on a real person that I know. As I would write about them, I'd think about that person and some of the things that I learned from them. So I'll give you an example. In the book, there's one of the characters, his nickname is Bud. And I have a good friend. In fact, he's flying out on Thursday to spend a long weekend with my wife and I. And his nickname is Pud, P-U-D. So I modeled this character named Bud after him. And Bud is somebody who seems to get more joy out of seeing their friends happy than their own good fortune. And I actually saw this with my friend when many years ago we were in San Diego. And my wife really wanted to play Torrey Pines, a world famous golf course. And we were out there for his daughter's wedding. And he said, "What time do you need to be at the golf course?" And she said, "Probably by 6:30. And he said, "I'll be down here before 6 a.m. And so we got in the car, we went over to the golf course, she got on. When I watched him afterwards, and I get a little emotional when I say this, he was so happy for her that she got to play. I think he was happier for her than she was getting to play. And I thought, it's such a rare quality to see that in people. So in the story, the neighbor Bud displays that with the main character, and the main character begins to see that, and he questions him. He says, "Bud, you always seem happiest when your friends are happy, even more so than your own good fortune. Why?" And the guy tells him, he says, "I learned long ago it's better to give than receive. And that when I am giving and the joy that I get, I have unlimited opportunity to give. So joy can be unlimited." And so that's one of the essential things that the main character, John, takes away from his interaction with his next door neighbor. And almost every chapter has a nugget in it where you're learning something about life and influence and happiness and things like that. And so it was so much fun to write it and to honor the people that I've learned so much from.
Wow. That's a lot of things that we can learn from your friend Bert in here, because a lot of the people out there, we think for ourselves before we think for others, and then he's doing a different way, in different directions, and that set him be different in the crowd, right?
One of the things that I teach when I talk about the principles of persuasion, there's a principle called liking. And everybody gets this, right? It's easier for somebody to say yes to you if they know you and they like you. And people will mistakenly spend all their time trying to get people to like them. But the real key is that I would come to know and like you. Because two things happen there. First, when you begin to sense that, hey, Brian really likes me, really cares for me, that's what opens you up to whatever I might be asking. That's why it's easier for you to say yes. But the more I get to know and like you, I do want your best. I mean, when you think of your friends, you want the best for your friends, right? So if we're looking to make friends with people, then whatever I'm going to ask of you is going to be in your best interest. And that's how you receive it. And we're creating a virtuous cycle. When I begin to engage reciprocity, right? The feeling that you want to give something back because I've done something. I'm not giving in a manipulative way. I'm giving because I know you, I like you, and I genuinely want to help you. And that's how you receive it. And if I need your help in the future, you want to help me because of what I've done for you and the relationship that we've had. And these subtle mind shifts make all the difference in terms of how we relate to people, the joy that we get, the success that we have.
Wow.
So Brian, I think for our culture, sometimes we think that influence take very long time, and sorry for the word manipulate, run faster and more effective in some way. So in your business, can you please share with us how to avoid, that border between influence and manipulation? Yeah.
I always think that I always start by talking about the principle of liking. Because, when I ask an audience, would you manipulate your friend? Nobody would. And I'd say, I wouldn't manipulate my friends either. So let's make friends out of the people that we're working with, the customers that we're dealing with. And even if we don't have an opportunity to have a longer term relationship, if I still notice something positive or a quality about you, and I say that is convincing me that you're a pretty nice person. And you're feeling good about that compliment. And if I'm doing it from a genuine spirit, and you sense that, you're feeling better about the transaction. And we both end up having a better interaction during that time. So I think in order to make this happen a little bit faster, people just need to be very thoughtful when they go into situations. First, I want to make friends of the people that I'm interacting with. How do I do that? I'm going to consciously look for what I have in common, because we usually feel pretty good when we're talking to people that we see as similar to ourselves, whether it's the sports teams that we like or the pets that we have or the kids. When we find that we have things in common, we start bonding over that. Or if I'm looking to pay a genuine compliment. So I go into those situations with those two thoughts in mind. What can I connect on and what can I compliment? Not because I'm just trying to get you to do what I want, but because I want to enjoy you. And I know that's the shortcut to start making it happen.
Wow. So make friends and looking.
Thanks, Brian.
So we look at each person that we meet, find things in common, and with the interest to become a friend with that person. And that is how the influence take place, right? Brian, would that lead me to the questions? Back to the basics, because we have each of us, we have a different definition of influence. You've been working with the global expert, Dr. Robert, and he's expert in the influencing also. So in your definition, what is influence at the beginning?
So I'll go to somebody better well known and more highly revered than Dr. Cialdini, Aristotle. I love Aristotle's definition of persuasion, and I use those words quite often interchangeably. Aristotle said that persuasion was the art of getting someone to do something that they wouldn't ordinarily do if you didn't ask. And you think about this, right? Somebody's not doing something that you want or need them to do. How you ask or how you communicate may make all the difference between a yes and a no. And so what we study when we look at the influence process are, what are those things that make it easier for people to say yes? So two people can have the same product or service or request, and one person who understands influence might get a yes the vast majority of time, and the other person, again, same product or service, and they don't get that. And it's because one person is tapping into what the research says makes it easier for people cognitively to process information and ultimately to say yes. And so I like Aristotle's definition of persuasion. And I tell people, it's not always about changing how somebody thinks about something. For example, having worked in the insurance industry, a huge problem is people on their phones while they're driving. We call it distracted driving. I could share statistics with an audience and they'd probably go, wow, I didn't know that. But if they get in their car and they keep texting and driving, I've done nothing to solve the problem. So my first focus is usually behavior change. If I can change how somebody thinks about something, that's wonderful because it might make it a lasting change. But quite often we're looking for, we need a quick, immediate change. We need somebody to say yes to getting us the report, or our kids to cleaning their rooms, or some things like that. It doesn't take us massive change of thinking and character or anything. We just want to get them to do something. So that's why I really, really appreciate Aristotle's definition.
Wow. So if we want to learn to be a good influencer, right? And besides, be likable, besides, besides asking, learn how to ask the people the right kind of questions, build relationship. What else that we should be doing now, Brian, so that we can build that ability to influence, better?
Mm-hmm. Well, if I go back to what we talked about with liking, if I'm getting to know somebody, that informs my giving, which taps into reciprocity. The other thing it really taps into is the principle that we call consistency and commitment. Human beings tend to live in alignment with how they view themselves. What have they done in the past? What have they said? What do they value? What do they believe? If you are getting to know somebody, you're probably learning about what they've done, what they've said, what they believe, and what they value. And if you use that information in your communication, if you're like thoughtfully saying, I understand I know what he said or done, how can I align what I'm asking with that? That's what makes it easier for you to say yes. A visual example of this would be, I live in Columbus, Ohio, and where I used to work was about a 15-mile straight down the highway to the center of the city. Now, there was an alternate route to go home, which would be about 2 miles longer because it went to what we call the outer belt. If my wife had called or texted in the day and said, hey, can you stop at the store and pick up something? If the store was right in line with how I normally drive, that's an easy yes. But if what she was going to ask me to do was to go to the store out here, I think about it a lot more. And I might say, well, I'll wait till Saturday or something like that, right? It's not in line. When we are thoughtfully trying to consider somebody's prior behaviors and actions, that's like that straight line. And the more that I can frame my request in a way that aligns with how you already think and feel, then it makes it so much easier for you to ultimately say yes. So that's another area where liking begins to inform another one of the principles. And I'm not doing this just to sell a product or get you to do something, because I've already established the liking. And so now I'm just saying, how do I help you, and how do I frame this so that you will see the merits of it, and you'll probably be like, I'm so glad I worked with Brian on this. So everybody wins.
But that means that we need to invest a lot of time in to understand, like me, and I need to invest time to understand what Vivian wants, and then so I understand the lie that she prefers. So every time I ask the request, it's gonna be in line with what she wants, right? She prefers. But now if we want to influence the many, because how can we establish that lie, understand that lie like that, Brian?
Well, there'll always be people who are out. I mean, like a bell curve. There's always going to be people who are out on the sides, but understanding your audience. If you're going to speak to a trade group or an association, they're probably very like-minded people, and they probably have you in to talk about a specific topic. So you get a general sense of where is the bulk of the group probably on their thoughts on particular issues. Same thing if you're going to go into a company. You can probably gauge pretty quickly or do a little research, reading online about the company, but where would the bulk of the employees perhaps be? And then understanding that, starting to use language that will resonate most with the largest part of that group. That's how I would approach it.
Wow. Got it. My question next is about people got influenced already, and we want to re-influence them to the different directions, and this related to a lot of related to the people within the family that I know. Maybe, for example, like our kids being influenced by some social media superstars and things like that, and being still into that direction for so long. We want him to change the way that to see a different perspective. But it's really hard for us to persuade him or influence him to change his thinking, because he's been influenced by somebody else already. In that case, how can we come in and help the people, right?
Well, I think a lot of times if somebody thinks you're trying to actively influence them, you're trying to change their thoughts on a social issue or something like that, they will probably naturally begin to resist that. And that's just normal in human behavior. But I think if you are just having casual conversation and you're occasionally dropping some thoughts, it's planting a seed. I'll give you an example. I have a brother-in-law who got divorced and was married for a long time, really struggled with it. And he and I were talking one time, and I said, have you thought about getting some counseling? It might help. And he initially was like, that's like talking to a mirror. How do you feel? Why do you feel this way? And he was kind of mocking it. But as time passed, and I occasionally mentioned it again, I wasn't recommending people or anything, and I think others did. I learned just last night that he actually has started some counseling. So I didn't have to convince him in the moment. He's known me for a long time. He's been my brother-in-law for 34 years. I think he respects me. We've had some wonderful conversations. So it was just about planting a seed. The other thing I would say too is investing time in people without trying to influence them, but just trying to learn about them and their experiences. And so I'll give another example that here in the United States, after George Floyd was murdered, there was an individual that I had been reaching out to in a business sense, and Giovanni is Black. And I just said in July, I said, hey, rather than talking business, do you want to talk about what's going on in the country? And he was like, heck yeah. And so we started having conversations every couple of months. And it was never about trying to convince him of anything. It was about learning who he is, what his perspective is as a Black man growing up in the United States. And then he would let me share my perspective on things. And it was, we would ask questions of each other, but you could tell it's never about, I'm going to ask this question to prove he's wrong or get him to see things my way. It was out of genuine curiosity. Wow. And we're starting to bring more people into that group where we have these conversations. Are we changing? Yeah. My perspective on race continues to evolve and change, and I think his is too, but it's without either of us having an agenda. And so when it comes to like family members, I think that's a really good way of trying to approach change.
Wow. And I think this applies to everybody, right? So we're not coming with an agenda, but we're coming with the to settle the common ground and starting to know him first. Otherwise, we keep injecting and invading the knowledge, the perspective, the paradigms of another person with ours, and it's not gonna work because people resist, like you say. Brian, I have two more questions for you before we conclude this evening. And the first one is Vivian and I are in the quest of helping people to improve their ability to think. Okay, because we believe deeply that our ability to think these days is not increasing but diminishing. And if every chance that we talk to somebody that is really good at thinking, help people to expand their ability to think, we will ask these questions. Brian, how do you expand? How do you help yourself to expand your ability to think?
Well, I start my mornings with a long walk. Like I'll be outside for over an hour. I'll walk like 4 miles, and that is my time to think and pray. And for me, that sets the tone for the rest of the day. And from there, I usually come in and I'll read. I'll read something that has a religious flair, then I'll read something that's not, like I'm rereading Cialdini's book right now, but I read a lot. So that, I think those two things. And then a third thing that I do is I try to be very social with people on LinkedIn, but even more so with people I have an opportunity to get together with. So I had lunch yesterday with somebody. I went to the cigar shop with somebody last night. I've got lunch planned tomorrow, and I've got a dinner planned with somebody. So I really try to be very intentional about being with a variety of people, and then the conversations that we have, I think, stimulates a lot of thought. It's not just me choosing to read a book. It's somebody that I don't know what questions they may ask or where the conversation is going to go. And so I think those really help me expand my thinking.
Wow. So it's like time for walking.
So,
Yeah. Go ahead, Given. Yeah.
and then get more people, the group of variety, diversity to let more thinking starting in. I think that he has two questions, but I will insert my question in before he asks you the last one. Um, since you are the influencer person, so may we learn a little bit who would be your influencer person in your life?
Who is an influential person in
Yeah,
my life?
with you, yeah.
So I'll say several. Certainly, I think of the person Jesus, because I'm constantly reading and thinking about his life here on earth, and what can I learn from him. My father, I think, for any young man who would probably say that their father, I'm actually writing a book about my relationship with my dad, and so I see patterns throughout our family history, and I really see the impact that he had on my thinking in my life. Certainly Robert Cialdini, his work changed the course of my career, so he's been incredibly influential. And my wife and my daughter, because nobody knows me better. They challenge me on things. They support me on things. If they bring something up, I'm going to consider it deeply, and I am a much better person because of my wife. And then our daughter is now 26 when she came along, and having to be responsible for another human being changed me. And so those would be the people I would say.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So allow me to go with the last question, Brian, and this is about you in the future. So we know you in the past, you in the present already. Now heading to the future a little bit. Is there anything that Brian is working on that exciting? So you would like to share with Vivian, with me, and the audience of the show, so that we can celebrate with you in advance?
Well, I mentioned working on a book about my relationship with my father.
That's
so
fun.
that has nothing to do with what I do in the influence space. My dad passed away a couple of years ago. It was a little bit unexpected. He was pretty healthy and had a heart attack. He served in the Marines. He was actually in Vietnam during the war, and it changed him in some not so good ways. And it caused strife with him and my mother, and ultimately strife between he and I. But we reconciled. And so the book is about our journey. And my goal with the book is that these people who serve anywhere in the world, but I speak from the perspective of being an American and having a father who was in the Marines, there can be some wonderful qualities of discipline and honor and certain things like that. And then depending on what they experience, there can be some horrible things too, like PTSD. And my goal with the book is to get it to the Marines as a resource, because if a young man reads the book and sees that maybe he's going down a path and he makes a different choice, that might end up saving his marriage or his life or any number of other positive things. If a family reads the book and starts to recognize or understand the Marine in their life a little bit better, and they make different choices, hopefully they can avoid some of the painful things that we went through and enjoy a little bit more of the relationship that they have. So that's the goal for the book. And I'm really excited about having it come out, and just also for my family as just like a little bit of a history of our family. I think it'll be something that's really, really good.
Wow. That book definitely will have a lot of influence on the people that who needed it, because it will be a guideline for them to see if they're gonna fall into a certain path that they need to make the adjustment right away. So your life had been doing a lot of works that had great influence on the people around us. So we thanks for doing that, Brian, and we wish you all the best, so that you can continue have more influence on the people that you can touch base with, and make their life a better place, and better life every day. Okay.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I thank you for the opportunity to share, to get some of these messages out to people who may not have heard them before, and I really appreciate your support in what I'm doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Please send our love to
Thank
your
you,
wife Jane and your daughter also. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Vivian, also.